That's better, isn't it? Okay, now there's only one place in the world we can find all these books in the same room together besides my own house, and that place is... okay, so Barnes & Noble is good for novelties, like if you want a pen that looks like the Elder Wand. But no, I'm talking about something much more close to home. It's the library. Now that I've shown you this, I want to tell you a little story. On the day, Thursday, April 19th, the Watchung Borough Council met here. They voted to close our local library. Boo. I'm going to interpret all of those cheers as boos, just telling you. A little history about libraries. Well, first I'm going to try to debunk the misconceptions that I think have clouded so many people's minds, not just in our community, but across the United States and around the globe. But first, some history about libraries. The term library comes from the Greek term liber, which loosely means something like filing cabinet. And the first recorded use of libraries, as we use them today, are in the Fertile Crescent region of Mesopotamia, more specifically, Alexandria. Now, one common thread that libraries across history and libraries now share, education. You might have heard of the recent so-called teacher walkouts in states like, I believe this is North Carolina, Kentucky, Colorado, also in Oklahoma, and if you just Google teacher walkouts, you can find a much larger list. That's because of recent drops in classroom funding. This is really a technology issue in disguise. There's some interesting facts. The American Library Association reports that a whopping 76% of the country's 16,604 libraries provide Kindle checkouts. It's totally not a knockoff. Nook checkouts, and technology, and Wi-Fi cafes. If we just do that math, that comes to about 12,619 libraries. I want to go back to the teacher walkouts. As I said, since the end of President Bush's administration, classroom funding has been steadily dropping. And one teacher cannot afford, on a teacher's salary, one teacher cannot afford 20 computers for his or her whole class. It's just not possible. Another interesting statistic. Ooh, that was loud. Another interesting statistic. Only 80% of American households have a high-speed computer. Only 70% of American households have high-speed internet. Now, people say that technology is the way of the future, and I'm not doubting that, and I don't think anyone should doubt that. So if this really is true, think about those children whose parents cannot afford a computer, cannot afford a tablet, cannot afford an e-reader, or cannot afford Wi-Fi. They'll just be stuck working some dead-end, blue-collar job, making a barely living wage. And it's not their fault. But one place that can provide all of these vital resources, regardless of social status or wealth, the local library. Think about those 12,619 libraries in America that provide these services. This is a vital service for those children. They are learning. These children are learning. It's going to help them down the road. Even though that our town and our school may be lucky enough to have computers and high-speed internet, there are others that are not as lucky. After all, we are not cavemen. We have technology. That brings me to chapter 2 of John's extremely long TED Talk. Another one of the major arguments I've heard against having a library in our community, why not go to Warren? Little geography crash course. This is my very own Somerset County. This is Watchung, and this is Warren. This is Warren's library. And this is Watchung's library. On a good day with moderate traffic, they're about 10 minutes away from each other. It's about 3.5 miles. Now, like our previous issue, this is another issue in disguise, and that issue is public spaces. Public spaces like a park, a pool, a baseball field, and a library. I once heard something interesting about a baseball field once. I was told that real Watchung families are out on the baseball field. And something else interesting, the Watchung Public Library has been deemed unsafe by the Somerset County Library System and is not up to the Department of Housing and Urban Development's building code. So it needs to be repaired, it needs to be refurbished. And as I was saying about the baseball fields, I was told that real Watchung families are out on the baseball fields and they don't want to pay for these refurbishments. And after all, Warren's just 10 minutes away. Now, figures for a modern library structure usually come to about $3 million and change. And with the passage of the New Jersey Library and Construction Bond Act, we had the opportunity to cut those funds in half. Those funds will be available by next year. And I crunched some numbers for you, and I found that it would be an annual tax increase on each household in Watchung of about a whopping $47. If you look at that, that's about 11 cents per day. Now let's just think back to our parks, to our pools, to our baseball fields, to our police stations, to our fire departments, to our rescue squads, and to our municipal buildings. I'd like to say what those families on the baseball fields have to say when the baseball field does need refurbishment, when the municipal building needs refurbishment, when the park needs refurbishment. And just because you're not at the library doesn't necessarily mean others are. You know, I don't go to baseball fields, but you know, if someone wanted to close down the baseball fields just because of refurbishment, you know, and just say to go to Warren, I would be rallying behind the people at the baseball field, because these are all public services. They're all government-provided services. They're all public spaces. And to say that a library is not a part of that is like saying the baseball field isn't a part of it. It's like saying the park isn't a part of it. It's like saying the rescue squad or the police department or the fire department isn't a part of it. We have Watchung and we have Warren. Two separate communities, one incorporated in the late 1800s and one incorporated in 1927. We do not share a government. We do not share a police station. We do not share a fire department. We don't share a rescue squad. We don't share parks, and we don't share baseball fields. So each time someone says, you know what, I don't want to pay that 11 cents per day, why don't you just go down the street to Warren? Is that a little bit closer we get to the two communities becoming one? Two separate communities, not one. And what happens, I ask you, when the people of Warren say, you know what, our library needs refurbishment. We don't want to pay for it. So how about you just go to Bridgewater? And what do the people of Bridgewater say to just go do? Somerville. And what do people of Somerville say to go do? Hillsborough. By saying this, we are creating this kind of inevitable chain. I'd like you to take your attention off the screen for a second, just look at me. If you haven't noticed by now that I'm using Watchung as an allegory, then you should probably go back to 4th grade language arts. I have thrown a lot at you in the last 15-ish minutes or so, but I want you to try to best remember the things that I said, and I want you to take these things back to your community. Whenever someone may say, you know what, we don't need a library, you can just use the adjoining towns, the adjacent towns, excuse me. You know, you can just go someplace else, you can leave your community. And then I want you to stand up and say, you know what? We are our own community, and we need our own library. We need our own service. I'm going to close out by leaving a quote from my favorite author, Stephen King. When all else fails, give up and go to the library. Thank you.
right, we have one last TED Talk. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, so this is going to be a relatively short TED Talk, and it's about why green